service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Yes, sir. Welcome. Hi.
Hi, I'm Wendy.
Hi, Wendy. Welcome. Yes. Welcome. Yes, sir. Milo, welcome. Okay. Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? Yes.
Hi, I'm Meredith. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Meredith.
Next Saturday at 12:30 to 4:30, my home group, Clear Cut Directions, is having our anniversary meeting. We're meeting at Warwick Community Park, Food Fund and Fellowship, double speaker, next Saturday, the 21st. See me for more information.
Thank you, Meredith. Great. Any other announcements? Okay. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD donations. If you would like a CD of any speaker, past or present, see me or any home group member before or after the meeting. They are available free of charge. And now I'd like to ask Jill to please come up and read the preamble.
Hi, I'm Jill. I'm an alcoholic. The AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. I have Gabrielle to come up and read the AA 12 Steps of Recovery.
Hi, I'm Gabby. I'm an alcoholic. The AA 12 Steps of Recovery. 1. We admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. 7. Humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill and Gabby. The seventh tradition. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, I would like to pass the basket. We have no dues or fees, but we have expenses. This group provides many services. Your donations cover rent, big books, CDs, events and workshops, etc. There's absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Okay. And now I'm going to introduce the speaker, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Group, Jimmy A. from a Design for Living group in Neptune, New Jersey.
I used to be able to step right up on that, but those days are over. Wow, up here. Hi everybody, Jimmy, alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober. And it's customary where I come from to let you know that I have a home group. It's called the Design for Living Group. It's on the Jersey Shore. I have a sponsor. I have a service sponsor. I sponsor a lot of men. But most importantly, I've been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was on March 28, 1987. So extremely grateful for this way of life, extremely grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous, and extremely grateful to be here tonight. Thank you, Ron, so much for the invite. It's been a long time since I've been in Doylestown, obviously because of the pandemic, but we've been out here quite a few times for other friends that have spoken and workshops that run, and you guys have run, and just nice to be here, nice to see a couple of familiar faces. So just to give you an idea of what part of the Jersey Shore, because there's a lot of Jersey Shore, I live in Spring Lake, New Jersey. The locals like to call it the Irish Riviera. Members of Alcoholics Anonymous like to call it Cirrhosis by the Sea. You know, it's a big party town. It's a big, you know, the whole area. You know, you guys know, you've been there, and I've seen you. You know, so but it's just nice to be at a person or in-person meeting tonight. You know, it's kind of been weird lately, being asked to speak on Zoom, then in person, then Zoom. It's just weird. The Zoom thing is really, I don't know, bothersome to me now. So, but I'm glad to be here, and hope everyone stays healthy. So I'm in a railroad room apartment in northern New Jersey on the Hudson River, the Jersey side of the Hudson River, overlooking New York, and I'm getting the spiritual test. And it's probably a test that a few of you guys have gotten from someone who's armed with the facts about themselves and carries a message of depth and weight. And I'm sitting in this railroad room apartment, and this gentleman is peppering me with a few questions. And the first question that he asked me is, how long can you hold your breath? How long can you be in a 12-step program and not work the 12 steps? What does your relationship with God look like? Well, I'm a Catholic, I believe in God, but you know, what's God really have to do with any of this? What makes you alcoholic was another question. And the best I could stammer out of my mouth in that moment was, I drink too much. I had no idea what I was up against. I had no idea about this physical allergy. I had no idea about this mental obsession. I had no idea about really what I was really up against. Then he asked me a question that most of you guys probably might not believe, maybe you will believe, but this is the way it was in my neighborhood in the late 80s and the early 90s. He asked me, where's your big book? And I looked at him and I said, what's a big book? Now, I'm sure there was a book at a, a literature table or maybe at a podium, but I didn't even know what a big book was. Now, I'm not embarrassed by those answers. I'm probably more embarrassed to let you know that I was 5 years sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous at that time, dying from something I didn't even know or something I didn't even understand, and it's called untreated alcoholism. I was under the delusion at that time that abstinence is a solution to my problem. I thought abstinence, by not drinking, the spiritual malady that I suffer from, even though I didn't understand what a spiritual malady was, would be solved by not just picking up that first drink. But at 5 years without a drink, I'm in this guy's apartment, and he's starting to paint me into a corner on really what I'm suffering from. He painted me so far into that corner, I only had 2 alternatives to pick. One is to live the spiritual life, or 2, continue to do what you're doing. And at 5 years without a drink, active in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, a big part of a big group in the Jersey City Young People, it was called, I'm dying. And I had no idea about that. I like to tell everyone, and you know, a lot of you guys have heard this before, I was born perfect, and I was quickly handed over to these 2 character defects called Mom and Dad. And though I joke about that, you know, one of the things I understand is that many of us walk around the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous with a lot of delusions about a lot of things, and I didn't understand that for a long period of time. You see, alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle, it comes in my mind, and my mind will create a lot of scenarios, a lot of delusions, a lot of lies, things that I believe, a lot of old ideas that I've been following for 20, 30, 40 years of my life. But here I am, you know, growing up in this family. I grew up in North Jersey. You know, I have these 2 parents who probably gave me everything they needed to give me. Morals, values, love, good education. And for whatever reason, I just took everything of goodness and rolled it into a ball and tried to stuff it down my parents' throat. Now again, you know, I'm just that type of guy who has been living like that for a long period of time, even into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, where I live under that delusion that I'm the victim, that nothing's my fault. I'm always that guy who's pointing out, that's blaming you for the way I feel deep down inside. And it took me a long time to really uncover, discover, and see the truth about Jimmy. But here I am, I'm growing up in this neighborhood. It's a blue-collar neighborhood. Everyone's a cop, everyone's a fireman, everyone's a union worker. The only requirement for membership in a neighborhood is 5 or more kids. It's the 60s. It's you know, it's a tough place to grow up. It's kind of like Philadelphia, I would say, you know, in New York City. But it's a place where I loved it. I just loved it. And with so many kids and so many events going on, birthday parties, christenings, graduations, you name it, you know, there was one common thing at everything that went on, and that's called King Alcohol. And again, we hear this term all the time, that alcoholism is a disease of perception. The way I saw things as a young kid was that alcohol equates to fun. Alcohol equates to freedom. Alcohol equates to problem solved. And I would watch my old man, I would watch my older brothers, I'd watch the guys in the neighborhood, and when they drank, they just seen something happen. Something became different about those people, and it was attractive to me. And I'm 6 years old, I'm 7 years old, I'm 8 years old. You know, I grew up in a neighborhood where there's a bar in every corner, and when we walk up to the schoolyard to play ball, I would look in that bar, and who would I see? I'd see you guys in there playing pool, watching a ball game, playing shuffleboard. I'd see you women in there trying to pick up these guys, you know, and again, my mind I haven't taken a drink, but my mind is being molded. I can't wait to do this stuff. And that day came. That day came at 13 years old. And the reason why I think I picked up a drink at 13 years old, as I look back and I kind of inventory my life, I look at the way I grew up in this family. You know, I grew up with a lot of fear, I grew up with a lot of insecurity, and I grew up with a lot of secrets. And the reason why I tell you that is because I got this guy called Dad. He's cunning, he's baffling and powerful. My dad's a tough guy. My dad's a Korean War vet. My dad's a guy you just don't fool around with, you know? But I would watch the magic. And the magic would be at 5 o'clock every day when my father would walk in from work. He was a butcher. He was a guy. He was just a tough guy. You know butchers, you know, they wear those white aprons, and there's always blood on my father, you know. So I'm looking at him. I'm not sure if he cut a cow open that day or he beat a guy up at a red light, but that's the kind of guy he was, you know. And I was afraid of my father growing up. That generation, he would have been 95 now. That generation was a type of generation where, you know, and I'll just speak for him, you know, there wasn't no expression of emotion from that man. No love, no anything like that. But every day at 5 o'clock, my mom would make these 2 pitchers at 5 o'clock. Martinis and Manhattans, 2 pitchers, I remember it. I could smell it almost standing right here. And my dad would come in, he'd take that first drink, and he became a different person, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And my dad would take that drink, and all of a sudden he became a different person. He became the fun dad. He became the guy who wanted to have a catch in the backyard, tell some jokes. You know, he just became, like many of us, when we take those few drinks, a different person. But don't let me fool you, there was those days. And those days looked like this. My dad would take that first drink, and all of a sudden the plates in the kitchen would go flying across the kitchen. Kitchen chairs would be flying. All of a sudden, maybe one of us young kids, if he grabbed us, we'd be flying across the kitchen. Now that doesn't make me alcoholic, but that makes me a kid that grows up with a lot of fear, a lot of insecurity, and like I just said earlier, a lot of secrets. Because what goes on in my house never leaves my house. That's a cardinal rule. you know, and what goes on in my neighborhood never even leaves the neighborhood, to be honest with you, what it was like back then. So, you know, again, you know, I'm 13 years old, and there's always that, I think if we all look back on our life, I think there's always this one little event that might have happened that might have changed the course of things. And I look at this one little event, might not sound like a big event, but, you know, my parents wanted something better for me. And they took me out of the public school system in 5th grade because there was a lot of violence going on at that time. And they put me into the Catholic school system, where I knew nobody. No, I didn't know any kids. I didn't, you know, now I'm introduced to these things called nuns. They're cunning, baffling, powerful in their own way. I'm religious educated. It was a different way of life. And I took it personal, and I had a resentment against my parents. And very shortly after that, I found myself in a cemetery with 5 guys, 51 years ago. I can't believe it. I can remember like it happened this afternoon. 51 years ago, I'm in this cemetery with 5 guys. I can still remember their full names. And here comes that first bottle. It's called Colt 45 malt liquor. And I put my hand in there and start drinking on that Colt 45. Here comes that second bottle. It's Mohawk Blackberry Brandy, and I start drinking on that Blackberry Brandy. Now, you hear an expression many times in Alcoholics Anonymous that we live life forward, we understand it backwards. I look back 51 years ago, I know what I suffer from. And I can say that with much assurance because being around here long enough, I know what the problem is. It's this thing called the physical allergy coupled with the mental obsession. And more importantly, it's all driven by the search engine that's deep down inside of me, which is the spiritual malady. So here I am, 13 years old, terrified, insecure, filled with secrets, and I get the thing that's going to solve the problem, the magic elixir. It's called King Alcohol. And on that first day, I loved the effect produced by alcohol. I puked purple for like 2 weeks. I took a beating from my father that night. My mother grounded me for life, but the hook was in. I couldn't wait to do it again. And why I could look back 51 years ago and tell you this with assurance is that, you know, I'm alcoholic right out of the gate. That I have no power, no choice, no control once I start to drink. Right from the get-go, I was that kind of drinker. That once I took that first drink, I just couldn't stop. You know, what I started to find out later on, anyway, in Alcoholics Anonymous, is that very quickly I had that second leg of the 3-legged stool put into place, and that's the obsession. The idea that's so strong it overcomes all other ideas. After that first 2 weeks, after that first drink, I could not wait to do that again. I couldn't wait to be with those guys again. I couldn't wait to go to the football game. I couldn't wait to go to the dance. I couldn't wait to recreate that night because for that night, King Alcohol did its job. It silenced that thing deep down inside. I come into Alcoholics Anonymous years later, and what's one of the first things I hear from an old-timer? That alcoholism is a soul sickness caused by a separation from God and a disconnect from each other. I am so disconnected from God, and from a young age, I'm building walls between me and you. And the reason why is because I'm afraid. The reason why is because I have secrets. The reason why is because we don't talk about what goes on deep down inside. I am becoming my father at a very early age. I am the same person. So here it is, like my old sponsor used to say, after that first night, I stepped right on the path that goes straight to hell. Because over the next 16 years of my life, not only is my drinking progressive, but something else becomes very progressive. And that's probably in a lot of us, and that's my behaviors. And I'm a street kid from the get-go. My mother would open the door at 8 o'clock, scoot us all out of the house, and she knew we'd all come back eventually. But when you do something like that, you just become a product of the streets. And when you're a product of the streets like I was, you become a little thief, you become a little criminal. You do all the things you need to do to get a couple of drinks or some drugs in your pocket. And I love that stuff. I love that stuff. Very quickly, the males in my family, not so much my father, but my older brothers, guys I looked up to, weren't very important in my life. You know who was important in my life? The neighborhood bookie. I thought he was the greatest guy you could ever meet. That guy had a brand new car all the time out there. He always pulled out a wad of cash like that, and he always had a good-looking woman on his arm. And again, that sounds ridiculous even saying it, but man, that was something that looked attractive to a guy like me. See, when you're broken, anything that looks like that looks really good. It looks like diamonds to you, So here I am, I'm getting in a lot of trouble, I'm a street guy, I'm not educated very well, if Ron drove by me and he saw me in a corner, he would yell out, "Hey Jimmy, there's a dead bird." I would look up. I mean, that's the kind of mentality I have. I mean, I'm not real smart, But I loved the streets. I loved it. I loved what we did on the streets, But, I was very fortunate. My parents put me into good schools. I was in a prep school. I was dressed like this every day, the drinking age back then in Jersey was 18 years old. I was getting served at 15 years old because I was tall, I had hair on my head, and I had a mustache at 15 years old, so it was very easy to get served. I started to watch something that I thought was really unbelievable. I would wait on a caddy corner. Now, back in those days, we didn't have yellow buses taking you home from school. You had to get on public transportation. And what I would witness standing on that corner is the Wall Street guys coming off the PATH trains from New York City. And there was a liquor store that was caddy corner from the bus station or the bus stop. And they would walk in there and they'd come on that bus and they'd have a brown bag, they'd have a 6-pack, they'd have an 8-pack, they'd have something to take the edge off on the way home. And boy, for a guy like me, that looks like something that looks really normal. See, the alcoholic life looks very normal to a guy like me. And I would start doing that same behavior for a long time, right through high school, from sophomore year, junior. Every day I would drink on the way home from school. And, we give those ridiculous, rationalizations, justifications to our parents. Mom, algebra was tough today. I had to take the edge off, so she would be screaming at me. My father would be going crazy on me, But what I didn't understand was the first drink concept. You see, from an early age, I had everything that you guys wanted. I had goals, I had aspirations, I had dreams. I didn't want to be a union worker, even though I eventually became one. I just had this idea that I wanted to be somebody more than I was. But I didn't understand that every time I take that first drink, all bets were off. And when I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, eventually I hear the first drink get you drunk. I'm thinking, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's the last 20 drinks. It's the outside issues I'm taking. That's the stuff. I had no idea that the first drink was the thing that set up the whole thing. So here I go through high school, I go through the greatest 10 years of my life called college. I mean, I go out to a college in Pennsylvania, out here somewhere, University of Scranton. I'm up in Scranton, 9 guys from the same high school. We all go to the same college. It's like Animal House, And I really love to tell you that, I lasted 10 years. I love to tell you that I lasted 1 year because I got asked to leave because of my drinking. And what's a 18-year-old alcoholic do when he comes home? No trade, no education. I just become a barroom drinker on a daily basis, sitting in that bar like many of us do, hoping, wishing, praying for the right job, the right girl, the right something out there to fix this inside of me. I couldn't put words to the feelings I had inside. I'm the double-edged sword guy, where I'm blaming everyone on one part of me for the way I feel in here, and I'm seeking something out there to make myself feel better, whether it's women, money, cars, you name it. I'm looking for some materialistic thing to just change the course of my life. But I continue to take that first drink, and nothing changes. So what happens is I'm just going through, odd jobs, weird jobs, crazy jobs, all kinds of stuff. And, I'm about 25 years old, 24 years old at this point, and I'm in a bar one day, and, this is the way I do relationships, ladies. I see a girl, she's at the back door, at the back wall hanging out. She looks nice, she looks pretty. I see my sister over here. I say, hey, listen, I'll buy you an illegal substance if you introduce me to her. She does, and 7 months later, I'm married. And that's how I do relationships. I don't really care for her. I don't really care about me. I'm non-caring, I'm irresponsible, but again, under that delusion, a lot of us walking around with these delusions that if I just get married, if I just do the things that the guys in my neighborhood are doing, because they seem to be able to handle life at ease. They're getting married, they're starting careers, they're having kids. It just seems like that looks like the way that's going to just make me feel better about myself. And I get into this marriage, and within 7 months of this marriage, or 4 months into this marriage, I walk out of this marriage. Because what I don't understand about me is that I have the inability not to take that first drink. See, I'm powerless, and I have no mental defense against that first drink. And every time I take that first drink, all bets are off. And so I'm in this marriage for about 4 months, and it's really difficult to be in a marriage when drinking's more important than being a married man. And so I make a decision, like most cowards do. I walk out of the marriage because I want to drink rather than be married and work on something that looks really important in my life. And after 4 months, I take off to Boca Raton, Florida, where I have friends and a lot of people that I know down there. And I'm in this $1 million condo, a friend's family, and I'm sitting in there, and I'm thinking about, looking back, I'm thinking about, somewhere along the lines, God must have cracked my skull open because, He put this chalkboard on my head. And on this chalkboard, there was these 3 emotions of shame, guilt, and remorse. And it seems everything up to my life, in my life, up to this point, resulted in one of those things. the shame of being a failure as a student, the shame of as a failure as a son or a brother, the shame of not being, in this relationship. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. The guilt of the things, that the hurt, the pain I've created people in my life, the remorse, the crime I've been committing. I can't even tell you how many times I was locked up at this point. I just had so much of this going on. But here in Florida, I got the answer. Because every morning I'd get that knock like we all get. And who would be at that front door would be the four horsemen of terror, frustration, bewilderment, despair. Every morning I was waking up restless, irritable, and discontent. Every morning I just had it on me. And I knew the answer at this point. It was called Johnny Walker Red. You see, I'm at this point in my drinking where I don't even need to take that first drink. I just need to crack the seal of the bottle. Because I take that drink, and guess what's going to happen? That grandiosity is going to come back. And when I take that first drink, all of a sudden that perfect little kid comes out to play again. And now it's everyone's fault for the way I'm feeling. So that's what's going on in my life, 4 months into a marriage. I'm down in Florida, and I eventually come back to New Jersey, and I have so much shame, guilt, and remorse in my life, and the things that I'm doing, and the pain I'm causing, and all the hurt, and all the crime, all that crap that goes on with this game. And I make a decision that when I come back to New Jersey that I can't talk to anyone, so I make a decision to live on the streets. And for the next 19 months of my life, I walk the streets of Jersey City and New York City, doing what we do when we do on the streets. Panhandling, stealing, you name it. I always like to say that one night on the street is one night too many. And what happened to me was, it changed me. It changed me. It shut me down emotionally, it shut me down psychologically, it shut me down as a human being, just living on the streets. And just going from day to day to day, I lost track of days, I lost track of times. I couldn't even tell you if it was summer, spring, or fall sometimes, because I was so shot out. But I walk in a bar one day, and I walk in this bar, and this old-timer walks up to me, and he goes, "Hey, Jimmy, you need to go to Newark Airport. They're hiring guys like you." Finally, being seen for my potential, right? And I go out to Newark Airport. I just turned 29 years old at this point. And I go out to Newark Airport. And I can't tell you how broken I was. I can't tell you how sick and desperate I was. I couldn't put into words of what I was really feeling on that day. I come into Alcoholics Anonymous eventually. I'm given that blue book. I open up to page 8 and I read Bill's story. And Bill puts the right words right to my first step experience. I think he puts the words to everyone's first step experience, and was certainly mine on that day in that Newark Airport. Because no words could tell the loneliness and despair I felt in a bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I met my match. I've been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master, and it might have been the first time I even understood that alcohol was a problem here. And I sat in a chair just like this. It was set up similar just to this room right now. I sat in a metal chair, dying of something I didn't even understand, when a complete stranger sat right next to me. And after a couple of minutes, this gentleman looked at me and said, "What's your problem?" And I spit up my life story on this guy. And after about 10 minutes, he looked at me and said, "I have the solution for you." I said, "What's that?" He pulled out a piece of paper. This is pre-cell phone beeper days. He wrote down the street. He goes, "You know where the street is?" I said, "Yeah, it's my old neighborhood." Put a number in front of that street. He says, "Is it possible for you not to take a drink today?" I said, "I have no idea. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. I want to drink right now." He goes, "Try not to drink and try to be in front of this address at 7 o'clock tonight." And all I could say is, but for the grace of God, I'm in front of that address that night at 7 o'clock, stone cold sober. My knees are knocking. I'm even questioning, did I really meet somebody today? Because I was so delusional at this point in my life. And all of a sudden, this 1979 Chevy Impala pulls up, and the stranger's driving that car. And there's a bunch of other strangers in that car. And they rolled down the windows and they said those magic words, probably the most spiritual thing you'll ever hear in AA, "Get in the car." And I got in the car with these gentlemen, complete strangers. And they took me around the corner to my grammar school. And for years I thought it was bingo, it was AA, who knew, And I walk into my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And walking into grace doesn't feel like walking into grace. It felt like I was walking out of chaos. I couldn't understand, I didn't understand the enormity of walking into my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've been with you guys since that day, on March 28, 1987. And I will never forget walking down those metal stairs, walking down that hallway, looking into my right where the cafeteria was, and I had almost a recollection of when I was a 6th grader, 7th grader, 8th grader, with those goals, with those aspirations, with those dreams. I want to be somebody. I don't want to be like my old man. But the problem is I've taken that first drink. And as I walked down to the end of that hallway, I could smell the coffee in the air. Well, it was really Sanka. I don't know, only old people know what Sanka is. It's like when astronauts drank that crap. But at the end of that hallway, I met the most important person you'll ever meet in AA. I saw him here tonight. We call him the greeter. And that gentleman put his hand out, and I grabbed that flimsy reed, and he pulled me into you. Sat me up front, said, here's a half a cup of coffee. Most important thing he gave me that night was something that we owe to every newcomer, every young person that walks into the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. He gave me a piece of dignity that night. Because he didn't judge me, he didn't care what I sounded like, he didn't care that I smelled, he didn't care every other word was a profanity. He said, keep coming back, kid. And I'm in AA on day one. That stranger became my sponsor that night, and that group became my home group on day one. I had no idea what a sponsor was, I had no idea what a home group was, but apparently I had them on day one. And I'll tell you how they were back then, because, you know, sometimes we beat up old timers because they don't go through the book like they used to, you know, back in the old days. I mean, that's just the way it was back then. Like I said, I didn't even know what a big book was. It wasn't until 1992 when Joe and Charlie blew through the Northeast that started to open people's minds to what recovery through the 12 steps of the book Alcoholics Anonymous was really about. But here I am on day two, and what those guys would do, you know, I used to joke that they didn't know the difference between a big book and a phone book because we didn't talk about the steps like we do today. We don't have workshops. We don't have all this stuff that we did today. We had speaker meetings, we had the 12 and 12, and we had a lot of discussion meetings in my neighborhood. And that's just the way it was back then. But on day one, after that meeting that night, what they did is they put me up in a hotel. They went to a department store, and now you have to be really old to know this department store called Two Guys. And in Two Guys, they bought me jeans, they bought me t-shirts, and they bought me a pair of Chuck Taylors, my first pair. And they put me up in a hotel for that night. Next morning, those guys came to get me to bring me to a meeting. And I did something that was so different for a guy like me. I shared an emotion. Now you might be saying, Jim, you shared an emotion? What does that mean? I'm still a street guy. I'm still shut down emotionally, spiritually. I am shut down as a human being, really. I couldn't even put two sentences together for a while. But when those guys came to me at that hotel, I'm giving it too much class. It was a motel, not a hotel. And I'm standing in front of that, and I'll never forget, I turned to this guy, Richie. I said, Richie, I'm scared. See, tough guys don't say stuff like that. You don't tell how you feel inside. That's against the code. You never talk about the way you feel. But I told this guy, Richie, I'm scared that I want to drink. He goes, I know you do. And what I witnessed that day was what a trusted servant in Alcoholics Anonymous does. He called up his wife, said, take me off the calendar. I'm with this guy all day long. He took me to 3 meetings, fed me 3 times. Must have drank 700 cups of coffee that day. But I was like a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Day 7, I can remember these days like a day just happened. Day 7, I'm in my new home group, and my new sponsors still don't know what they really are. And I'm at a business meeting. I have no idea what a business meeting is. But this guy, Richie, walks up to me and goes, I want you to take this job, this commitment. What's that? I want you to be the ashtray cleaner. Ashtray cleaner? You gotta be kidding me. I'm saying this in my head, not Joan, believe me. Why would I ever want to clean ashtrays? And see, I had a real rationalization, or a real, you know, the truth was, you know, I've put every possible substance in my body, but I have never smoked a cigarette in my life, so why do I need to clean ashtrays? I don't get it. But God did for me what I could never do for myself that day, because we all have that small voice within. Most times we just blow right through that stop sign, but for that night, I listened to that small voice within. And that small voice said this, he's trying to help you, why don't you just do what he says? And I said, okay, Richie, I'll clean the ashtrays. From day 7 to this moment standing right here, 35 and change later, I've been tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous through a commitment in the home group, through a district, or through an area. I've been tethered through the 3rd legacy of service and the things we do to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers out there that doesn't know we're in here. Thank God for that. And that really starts my life in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got back with that wife, unbelievably. You know, I got a real job. I got that house with the white picket fence. I had my first sober car. I had money in my pocket. It looked like my life was unbelievable, unbelievable. And to the untrained eye, it looks like normal living is a solution to alcoholism. And that's where I find myself at 5 years without a drink in my system. Still with secrets, still insecure, still with fear, unbelievable rage and anger inside of me. I'm the guy your home group Nick tags with the nickname Angry Jimmy. We all have one in our home group. There's Angry Jimmy, there's Angry Joe, there's Angry Mary. I'm Angry Jimmy. I'm filled with rage. I got all this stuff within inside of me, and I'm not drinking, so what do? I just lash out at people. I'm always angry about something. I'm always enraged about something. I intimidate people with my size. I'm just out of control. And that's when I find myself in this railroad room apartment with this guy. And my life changes on that day, because what Bill Grace did for me, he was the guy that came in from St. Paul, Minnesota, same place where my sponsor is from today. And he had that blue book underneath his arm. He was on with the facts. And even the old timers in my neighborhood, in my business meetings, would say, stay away from that guy, he's dangerous. Because he was bringing it's unbelievable when I think about it. He was bringing recovery to us. And the old timers felt threatened by that, which was quite surprising. But what happened on that day, I was in this apartment and he started to tell me what this is really about. He started to paint the goals of what Alcoholics Anonymous is really about. 2 goals that I truly believe to this moment right now. First goal, the obvious one. Don't pick up the first drink. But the second goal is the goal that we really want to attain, and that's to step out into the sunlight of the Spirit. And the only way that I'm ever going to step out into the sunlight of the Spirit is go through the darkness of my life. And so just like he did for me that day, and just like I've done for countless guys that sat at my kitchen table, we sit at that kitchen table, we opened up to the doctor's opinion, we start to talk about the problem, we start to talk about the solution, we do a 3rd step prayer, and I point to the glass door that's at the end of my hallway. I said, really, that's the goal. The goal is to get out there into the sunlight of the Spirit, because that's a place where we all should experience freedom from alcohol, freedom from the bondage of self. That's a place where we all experience the promises that our literature gives us. It's a place where I form a relationship with a power greater than myself. And it's a place where I experience total freedom. But there's a price to be paid to get out there. It's the destruction of self-centeredness. And the only way that I'm going to get through that glass door is that I have to walk through this hallway of life, the darkness of my life. And I got to uncover, discover, and discard the things in my life that are blocking me from God and blocking me from you. So I set out on this course of action. And see, Bill was painting this picture. He says it's really easy to do this. I like to read this reading all the time that I have. It's one of the most important readings that I think is in our literature. It's a simple thing from Daily Reflections. And if you turn to May 1st, it was just read, a couple weeks ago. I really like this. It says, it's a side of myself that I refuse to look at that rules me. I must be willing to look at the dark side in order to heal my mind and my heart, because that's the road to freedom. I must walk into darkness to find the light, and I must walk into fear to find peace. The way the old timers used to say that, it's like this. Alcoholics Anonymous is like a big bonfire. Most people in AA are just walking around the fire. Eventually the fire is going to go out. But if you really want to change, if you really want to have a relationship with God, if you really want to be free, you need to walk through the fire and get your ass burnt and feel the uncomfortability of change. But see, I can't do one thing for you, he would tell me. Just like I can't do for anyone here, and none of you can do it for me. And that's give you willingness. And the only way to attain willingness is one way. A good whooped ass, as my friend Ralph likes to say. Circumstances made me willing. At 5 years without a drink, dying in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was willing to walk into the darkness of my life because I had to do something that I thought was weakness, but it was really strength in disguise. I had to become vulnerable. That's a big term. I had to become vulnerable with another man. I had to trust whatever I said to this man was going to be like Vegas. It was going to be kept right here. And when I started to discuss my resentments, my fears, the common manifestations of living a life on self-will with this gentleman, when I talked about the crime and all the stuff I did and all those things I was ashamed and guilt-ridden about, I did it too, he would tell me. I know how you feel. Yeah, that doesn't feel too good when we do things like that. And all of a sudden I started to get this stuff on paper. And I started to do this original inventory, my first inventory. And I got it all on paper. Because I was under I believe one thing he told me, really important, that I'll never walk through that glass door into the sunlight of the Spirit with a secret in my back pocket. That I need to get it all on the table. And I did. And that original fifth step that I did was the most powerful day of my life, other than my 2 children being born. You see, when my kids were born, my daughter, God forbid, 32 years ago, my son 29 years ago, You know, my daughter was born, the doctor handed me the baby, cut the cord, I cut the cord, my heart split open with a joy and a feeling that I've never had before in my life. You guys who have experienced that know what I'm talking about. 3 years and 1 day later, my son, same thing. That day, when I said my original fit step with this guy, Bill Grace, I was in for a long talk. It was the most unbelievable day of my life because I gave him all. I gave him my life. And at the end of that fit step, I took that hour like it's instructed or instructed in the book. It says go home, take the book off the shelf, read the first 5 proposals. I didn't go home, I didn't take it off the shelf. I went to a place called Liberty State Park in Jersey City, overlooking Manhattan on the Jersey side. And I walked out on this pier, and I sat on this pier, and I opened that paragraph, and I start reading that paragraph. And those first 5 proposals, all the stones properly in place. All of a sudden, my throat started to like almost jam up, and tears started to come down my cheek. And I look to my right, and what do I see? A quarter mile to my right is the Statue of Liberty. I look across the Hudson River, and right where that clock is the World Trade Center. And when I look to my left, I could see Ellis Island, symbols of freedom. And here I sat, 32 years old, in the summer of 1992, and for the first time in my life, free. Free. And then I fell for the biggest trap we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. I fell prey to comfortability. And all of a sudden, all the good things that I was getting back, all of a sudden, things became more important than my primary purpose. And I didn't see it. Most of us don't when we fall into that trap. All of a sudden, overtime was important. All of a sudden, coaching baseball and coaching basketball, that was very important. All of a sudden, all those things that I was starting to get back very quickly became more important than my primary purpose. And I didn't see this. We have a term in Alcoholics Anonymous, we say it all the time. Don't let the life that AA gave you take you away from your AA life. And little by slowly, I started to be pulled away from AA, and I didn't even see it. I'm on the ocean. If I take the boat out in the ocean and just point it east, I see the curvature of the earth every day. It's the same scene. I see the sun come up. I could see the horizon. That's what recovery is like sometimes. You see the same thing every day, but what I don't see is what's going on behind me. And that's that I'm drifting from town to town to town. And many of us fall off the beam in Alcoholics Anonymous and we don't see it. Because all of a sudden, I didn't become accountable to my sponsor. All of a sudden, I'm telling him about 20% of what's really going on. All of a sudden, I'm blowing off commitments and not taking things that I should be doing. All of a sudden, I'm starting to get sicker and sicker and sicker in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and having a lot of trouble at home. And at 10 years without a drink, I do what most cowards do. I walk out of my marriage again into the arms of a woman who understands. And I blow up my life. I'm the guy the Fifth Step talks about. I build a beautiful spiritual structure for me and my family, and I tear it down with a senseless series of sprees. And I'm here to let you know you don't need to be drinking to blow your life up in Alcoholics Anonymous. Just sponsor people. You'll find that out. And at 13 years without a drink, after that relation blew up, I find myself in a bar in Red Bank, New Jersey, ordering a drink. Bartender, give me a drink. I understand what Dr. Bob was talking about when he says that he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. I didn't want to take that drink, but God damn it, I needed that drink. The pain was so great inside of me. Bartender puts that drink down right in front of me, arm's length away. I'm staring at that drink. The devil and the angel pop out. Drink it, don't drink it, drink it, don't drink it. All of a sudden, I don't know if it was 20 seconds, 20 minutes, a hand goes around the glass and pulls it back. And when I look up, the bartender just happens to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he says to me, "What are you doing?" Apparently throwing my life away. And what happened was, I took my tail and I put it between my legs and I walked out of that bar. So self-defeated, so dying again in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Living a life of secrets, living a life of anger, living a life of insecurity and fear, you name it, I was back in it again. How the hell did I get here again? And then 2 weeks later, I walked into a meeting, and it was a good friend of ours, Peter, who became my sponsor for 17 years afterwards, was doing a workshop. And my life changed. Because what happened was I started to get with him, and I started to go deeper. I started to peel that onion back and go deeper into Jimmy, and to start looking at things that I've never looked at before. How many times have we said to a newcomer when he walks into the door, when we're sitting with a newcomer, "Are you willing to go to any length and they just shake their head like a bobblehead doll. But do we ever explain what any length really means? Well, let me ask you something. Our literature asks us 15, 18, 22 times, we beg of you to set aside your prejudice, your old ideas against what? Well, let's start with everything. That's a good place. And one of the things that I had to do with this guy, Peter, was I had to start looking at my life in a different way. I had to start looking at all the conflict that was going on in my mind, all the isms that were going on in my mind. You see, I am under this delusion that my life should look a certain way. Relationships in my life should look a certain way. Money should look a certain way. Work should look a certain way. Alcoholics Anonymous should look a certain way. And the minute that does not look the way I think it looks, it creates the conflicts in my mind, which creates the attitude, creates the emotion, and off to the races I go. And when I sat with Peter, I started to look at some truth. How driven I am by a lot of old ideas about a lot of things. You see, I am the agnostic one. Here, God, here's the drink problem. I'll handle all the rest of my life. I do not bring God into all areas of my life. And if you think you're going to stay around here for the rest of your life, happy, joyous, and free, without a God in your life or self-will run riot, well, good luck. It didn't work for me. So what happened to me was I started to get down to causes and conditions in a level that I've never gotten before. And I started to look at these things with the help of Him. And I started to see real freedom. The one question that comes out of everything that we do in here is this: are you willing to live on terms other than your own? And see, I had to get to that place of yes. I'm willing to live with God's will no matter what goes on in my life. And when I started to do that, when I started to bring 6 and 7 into my life on a level that I never did before, my life started to change. You know, when we come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and sometimes when we stay around here, I say the delusion of the victim. There's some of us around here with double-digit sobriety that are still blaming people for what's going on in their lives. I had to take a look at that stuff. There were things going on inside of me that I never even understood until God had me ready to understand. So I started to go through the 6 and 7 on a level that I've never done before. What are you willing to stop doing? And what are you willing to start doing? Many of us come in here with the pendulum of emotions, One day I love her, the next day I hate her. One day I love my job, the next day I hate my job. You see what the process of the 12 steps, especially 6 and 7, do to get that pendulum to start swinging so broadly. And it brings us to a place of what? Being right-sized. Bill Wilson talks about the greatest gift, the emotional frontier. In that place, we could find emotional sobriety, even with a little wiggle room. You see, I had to get there. And the only reason I was going to get there, or the only way I got there, was this. I had to stop putting conditions on people, situations, and circumstances to make me happy. I needed to have a relationship with God. Here was a consideration that He threw out to me. I'll throw it out to you. Do you look at the people, the situations, and your circumstances of your life through the lens of a character defect, or through the eyes of God? My whole life I've been looking through the lens of a character defect. The lens of fear, the lens of jealousy, the lens of envy, the lens of anger. I have never looked through the eyes of God. And when I say the eyes of God, I'm talking about love and tolerance is our code. I'm talking about forgiveness. I'm talking about compassion. If it doesn't suit me, it's not for me. Am I willing to look at things from another angle completely? Just like our inventory talks about. And when I started to do that, my life started to change like I've never knew before. Adversity, we all have it. December 6, 1999, I'm in a horrific accident on the job. I got retired on that day at the age of 41 years old. I've had over 41 surgeries in the last 20 years. I like to tell everyone I'm 5'8", but after they put all the metal in me, I'm 6'4" now. It's a miracle how that happened. I wouldn't try it though. But like in a short period of time, I went through all those surgeries. I went through a divorce. I went through all that stuff, like many of us do. But the evidence is all around me of people that get through hard times. And I've never known what God is going to have in store for me. My wife Mary Beth over here, her home group was the World Trade Center, the Tower Group. And she would ask a bunch of us to come over to the city and do a little pitch like I'm doing tonight. And eventually it became a cup of coffee, it became lunch, became a proposal, and we'll be married 19 years, I think it is. I'll have to ask her later. In November. I know it is. Just unbelievable how your life can change when you give yourself to God in the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. We have a great relationship. We have a great life. Never forget, I was coaching basketball, girls basketball, love girls basketball back in the day. And I'm coaching this game, and it's going back and forth. It's intense. It was like God grabbed me by the back of the neck and said, look in the stands. I look in the stands, I see Mary Beth, my wife, sitting with my ex-wife, and sitting with my mother. And all I could think was, Jesus Christ, what are they talking about? That's the power of the amends. We sat with my ex-wife today over my daughter's house. We got our first granddaughter coming up in a couple of months. I mean, how exciting is that? You know? And we get together as a family. God has repaired us. God has healed the family. This family illness that we all suffer from, God has healed it. But we must take the lead. The spiritual life is not a theory. We must live this. And that is really my message. You know, it's unbelievable the things that God has put me on, the path He has put me on. You know, we started our home group, the Design for Living group, in 2006. You know, and the next following year, we became, from a meeting, we became a group. Big difference. I hope you know the difference. But after that first year, we needed a group service representative, and they said, Jimmy, will you be the GSR? I'm like, I'm 19 years sober. I don't want to do that crap. I was blinded by my ego. Because I went to a district meeting when I was 2 years sober, and the guys were talking about a pamphlet or something, and I took like a union meeting, who needs this, and I walked away. Well, I reluctantly put my hand up to be a GSR for my own group at 19 years sober, with a lot of fear, a lot of not understanding the service structure. About a month later, I go to this service assembly down in Hunts Valley, Maryland, and I meet two gentlemen. I just thought they were two old guys from the neighborhood. One guy is the United States trustee at large, and the other one's the Northeast Regional trustee, and they take me under their wing, and they start to show me what this is really about. Alcoholics Anonymous is a lot bigger than my little home group. Though my home group is the heartbeat of AA, there's a big world of Alcoholics Anonymous out there, and I was about to get my education on that, because these two men took me under their wing, and they started to do things with me that I never knew even existed in Alcoholics Anonymous. First, they gave me a service manual, and they said, read page S20. It's an excerpt from Bill Wilson's lawyer. His name is Bernard Smith. He's a non-alcoholic. He's the chairman of the board of the General Service Board. Just read this. Why do we have a conference? Why do we do the things we do in Alcoholics Anonymous? It's not to ensure our sobriety. We're here right now. But why we do the things we do is for the guy who's out there right now that doesn't know we're in here right now. There's a guy right now in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, who's cracking open a bottle of Johnny Walker Red and doing the same thing I did many years ago to just wash his day away. Right now in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, there's a single mom with 3 kids who can't wait to put those kids away and crack open that bottle of wine and just wash her day away. Right now, from my house to your house, there's a baby being born destined for alcoholism. So what I started to understand very quickly in here is we all have a responsibility. And though we're all single individual members of Alcoholics Anonymous, I got to give back to the thing that gave me a life. And so I got involved with other stuff in Alcoholics Anonymous. And all of a sudden I got on the service structure, and I started to go down this service structure. I became a DCM, I became the alternate area chair, I became the chairperson. Now, I'm not just telling you this for my ego, I'm just telling you this is the road that God put me on. I became the alternate delegate, and right now I have the honor and privilege of serving Northern New Jersey Area 44 as the delegate to the General Service Conference. I was at the General Service Conference 2 weeks ago. And an unbelievable experience, my second year as the delegate, of how do we carry the message to the person who's still out there that doesn't know we're in here. We do that in a lot of different ways. We do it through committee work. You guys go to treatment centers, you guys go to prisons, you guys go to detox to carry the message. We have literature that carries the message. We have committee work, we have a lot of things we do to carry the message to the person who's out there that doesn't know we're in here. And at that General Service Conference last week, we did a lot of work. Matter of fact, you'll probably hear from your delegate, I think it's her name's Carolyn N. from Easton, PA. We had a COVID outbreak at the conference. There's only 133 members at the conference, trustees, delegates, and staff workers. And over 42 of us got COVID 2 weeks ago. So though that might have put a dark cloud on what was going on, we got a lot of work done. And the work we do in Alcoholics Anonymous is to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. So as those guys told me, Jimmy, put the spiritual mirror up to yourself. You talk a good game, what are you doing in Alcoholics Anonymous to carry the message? Do you think just coming to a meeting is really to carrying a message? Well, I guess some people think that is, but I found for myself I can do more. And that's why I stay involved in the 3 legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I remember day 90. I remember day 90 like it happened this morning. On day 90, I'm at a podium just like this, dressed just like this. First time I put a jacket and tie on since high school. 90 days sober. My mother was sitting right there. My father was sitting right there. And they look at me and they're crying. Because I'm at a podium with this guy, Richie Schnorr, who's my sponsor. And he's holding up this little pin, a 90-day pin. It's a triangle with a G on one side and an AA on the other side, and a little dot in the middle of that triangle. And what he says to me is this: Jimmy, you're the little insignificant dot. Always makes you feel good about yourself. But I want to promise you something. And if you're new, if you're just coming back, I want to promise you the same thing. If you could put one hand in G, which is God, and one hand in AA, and get in the middle of this triangle, these 3 legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous, of recovery, unity, and service, you'll never have a hand to pick up a drink. That's how simple this is. And see, if you're new and you're coming back, or you're just here tonight not knowing, you have double-digit sobriety, you feel a little lost, I'm telling you, and I'm promising you, that if you put your hand in God and your hand in AA and get involved in this thing called recovery, you'll never have a hand to pick up a drink. We had a great friend, Jack C. from Hagerstown, Maryland. Good old Jack. Jack was a big circuit speaker. He got to know you. If he came to Doylestown, he would go home to Hagerstown and you start getting postcards. Wherever Jack went, he would send you a postcard. He would send you a postcard from Doylestown and say, "Dear Jimmy and Mary Beth, in Doylestown, the town reminds me of It's a Wonderful Life. Met a character by the name of Ron, but he's a nice guy," you know, on and on and on in this postcard. But then he would say this at the end of that postcard: "Sober sure is better." That's pretty simple. Sober sure is better. Man, what a life we got. Thank you very much.
Let's give another round of applause for Jimmy. It's customary for us to form a line and thank our speaker. They come here at their own time and expense, so we can do that afterwards. We do need some help cleaning up, and I just want to re-announce our sister group meetings. Again, on Monday night at 6 o'clock, we have a step meeting right here in this very church. And on Thursdays at 7:30, we have a big book meeting in Salem Church on Court Street. If you want information about those, come see me after the meeting. And with that, we have a beautiful way of closing. Our Father,